Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory. I'm just kidding, of course. That felt kind of right, though. And although this video is nothing like Game Theory, I do just want to say thank you to MatPat for instilling in me a love for this franchise and allowing me to now transfer that into my passion for movies. I don't play many video games in general, and especially a horror game like Five Nights at Freddy's just doesn't really pique my interest. So I've never played any of the games in the entire franchise. I haven't read any of the books, none of it. However, I have watched every single Game Theory video that has come out in the last 8 years about Five Nights at Freddy's. I love the lore, I love the storylines, I love the crazy theories, I love all of that. But I've never even played the game. It's kind of crazy. By the way, if anybody's been keeping up with MatPat in regards to the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, you'll know that at this point, he is not supposed to have a role or a cameo in the film, yet they did ask other YouTubers to do so. He is such a large part of what has pushed this franchise and built up the community to what it is today. Justice for MatPat.
That's cool. Good. Good for them, man. I mean, you know, it's like...
Also, before we continue, according to YouTube statistics, 98% of people who watch my videos are not subscribed.
What?
Anyways, from here on out, I'm going to mainly refer to Five Nights at Freddy's simply as FNAF. If that confuses you, I'm sorry, it's more convenient for me. In my opinion, FNAF has some of the most fascinating lore in any franchise literally ever. And naturally, I was very excited 3 or 4 years ago when Blumhouse announced that they were doing a FNAF movie. And now we're only like a couple months away from the release. So now I am making a video on it because I really just hope that it's a good movie. And if it's not, I want this to be me. Anyways, let's get into it. Now, obviously you saw the title of this video, and I'll be going through the reasons why I'm concerned for this film, but I don't want this to be a super depressing video. So let's start off with some positives, and then we can get into depression. Positive number 1. This movie exists. As a longtime fan of this franchise, I'm just very excited that we're even getting this film. That doesn't necessarily mean that the movie is going to be good, and in fact, sometimes a movie is bad and people say just be happy that it even exists. That's not necessarily true. I guess what I'm saying is 2 things can be true at once. It can be true that a movie exists, but it can also be true that that movie is trash. And more so than this film existing, the movie was actually delayed for almost 2 years due to script changes, which either means that it's taken time to craft a really good story, or it's a jumbled mess that they were just trying to figure out just something viable to release. My guess would be that they put a lot of care into it. Scott Cawthon, who is the game developer, he literally is the reason why Five Nights at Freddy's exists in the first place, is a big part of the story for the FNAF movie. And so since he's been the creative mind behind the lore and the storylines thus far, I feel like he's the best candidate to help translate that into a film. So I'm glad this movie exists, and I'm glad that Scott Cawthon is working on it, but again, 2 things can be true at once. That doesn't necessarily mean that the movie's going to be good. Positive number 2, the trailer looks promising. I don't have a ton to say when it comes to this positive. I think they did a really good job with the designs of the animatronics. They are very spot on with the game. I think the one thing that people are kind of iffy on is the color of the eyes. They're making some creative choices with that. I think we really have to wait and see in the context of the movie why certain things happen. But when it comes to the suit designs, they use a lot of practical suits, and I think it really shows. It looks really good. And same with the animatronics. I think the restaurant looks amazing. The set design in general is just stellar, and it's not like you have to do anything crazy for FNAF, because there's nothing crazy within the games there, but it just looks really accurate, and that's something that I think we should appreciate. Also, I can't play it here, but the music choice for the trailer was fire. Positive number 3. The cast. This is more from a pure movie perspective and less from a FNAF perspective, but Josh Hutcherson,
What did he say?
has a lot of potential for a role like this, being the main actor in this storyline. I think it gives him enough source material to work with, and it's not like super complicated to portray this character, but he's somebody who could take it to that next level. You could put some random actor in here who could do a viable job as our security guard. However, if you give it to somebody like Josh Hutcherson, then you have a lot more potential that he could take it even further than you're able to get with a video game. For those of you who don't know, Josh Hutcherson is best known for his role in all of the Hunger Games movies as PETA, but he's also been in other films such as The Polar Express, The Disaster Artist, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and of course, he's so well known for Cirque du Freak, the vampire's assistant. Someone who I'm even more excited to see is Matthew Lillard as William Afton, which I guess technically is not confirmed, but like, it's really confirmed. I don't expect to see him a lot in this movie, but I hope that we get to hear him a bunch, considering he's known for so many voice acting credits and a lot of like random stuff like Scooby-Doo movies and a bunch of other things. I'm not expecting a ton of actors in this movie, so even just having these two I think is really promising. On top of that, they've also confirmed that YouTuber Corey Kenshin will be in the film, as revealed at the end of the trailer. And I think we're all hoping that some other YouTubers get cameos as well, like Matt Pat, who I mentioned in the introduction, as well as Markiplier. Positive number 4. The potential. I know that I kind of talked about this with every other positive that I've already mentioned, but this is more just a general statement for this movie because it is based off of the FNAF franchise. We know how deep the lore goes between the games, books, spin-offs, and everything else that they've done over the last decade, even random websites that somehow give hints into the games and the lore. The idea that this could turn into a really interesting franchise with a well-crafted and interesting story is exciting as long as it's handled properly. With all of that being said, I am really hesitant about this movie. I didn't come up with a label for all of these, so let's just call these reasons to be depressed number 1, the movie's release. For those of you who didn't know, the movie drops in theaters on October 27th, but will be released on Peacock that same day to stream at home. Concurrently releasing a movie on streaming and in theaters used to be more common during the pandemic. Wonder Woman 1984, The Suicide Squad, Dune, and Luca are some examples that probably would have just gone to theaters had it not been for COVID-19. But instead, we saw them on streaming services the same day as their theatrical release. That's concerning for obvious reasons. Most direct-to-streaming movies, and I don't think Netflix really counts here because that is their only platform besides an occasional limited release in theaters, but in general, most direct-to-streaming movies aren't that good. That's one of the reasons why they go to streaming, typically because they lack the budget, hype, marketing that is necessary for a successful theatrical release. So maybe it's not a huge thing to be concerned about, but in my opinion, I think it's a little worrying. Reasons to be depressed, number 2. The lore. Look, it's obvious, like we've mentioned so many times in this video, that the lore is incredibly expansive and that they can capitalize on this to craft a super interesting start to a franchise. It could be a really good thing, but the key word there is could. I'm a little worried that between all of the lore with the games, books, etc., that it could be hard to make a solid first introduction to whatever this story is going to be. I don't want this movie to be too simplistic, but I also don't want it to be crazy with how much lore they feed us trying to set up this franchise. I want them to give us a taste of the lore to bite into. I don't want them to give us a whole platter that's like the bite of 83 in order to just be engulfed in this information. Was that too graphic? Reasons to be depressed, number 3. The trailer reveals a lot. I don't want to mention too much for those who haven't seen the trailer yet. I'm even just using clips from the trailer that are more generic. I'm not including anything that would have something to do with any characters or storylines that you wouldn't want spoiled. However, there are definitely some moments in this trailer where I just think that they showed a little too much, especially in this newest trailer. There's a specific scene that feels like it could very well be at the end of the movie. I hope I'm wrong, but that's just the vibe that I get from the scene, and I don't know how it could fit anywhere else in the film, and if it is towards the end of the movie, I'm gonna be so upset. And although the trailer showed a lot, they could have a lot more in store, which actually ties into reasons to be depressed number 4, the length. This is actually more of a recent rumor, and we don't have an official number quite yet, but the FNAF movie is rumored to be around 3 hours long. Now listen, when you think of a 3-hour movie, what comes to mind? You think of movies like The Godfather, Avatar: The Way of Water, John Wick 4, Avengers Endgame. The fact that the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is going to be lumped in with all of those other 3-hour movies is crazy. Now, there is something that I need to say here. It is a completely factual opinion. Nobody should disagree with this. Movie length really doesn't matter that much. I've seen plenty of movies that are an hour and a half long that I could have watched for another hour. And in the same vein, I have seen movies that are 2.5 hours long that easily could have been shorter. All of the 3-hour movies that I mentioned, I think utilize their length very, very well. All of that is to say, while I am a little bit concerned that this movie is this long, we don't know what that entails. Every movie is going to apply itself to its length very differently with what it introduces for characters and storylines and how it builds up tension, where the climax in the movie is, and just like what all they include. Point is, it varies from movie to movie. Some movies need a 3-hour runtime. So while it is concerning, I could be totally wrong and it could utilize its length very well. But what does my gut tell me about a FNAF movie that's the first in a potential franchise? My gut tells me it doesn't really need it. Okay, I have one more thing that I want to bring up here, and it's not a positive or a reason to be depressed. It's just a random thing. I don't really understand why people are upset about a PG-13 rating. This movie can show everything that it needs to, and it's not like the games were super violent. Yes, they were dark, and there were certain moments that were pretty graphic. I mean, it was like 2D pixels on a screen typically, but honestly, you had to fill in a lot of the scariness of the games yourself. And I feel like a PG-13 rating will be able to do exactly what it needs to for its representation of the game. I also just in general feel like PG-13 is more in line with the target audience that enjoys and plays the game. So I don't really understand why people are complaining. To put it simply, I'm cautiously excited for this movie. The potential is huge, but there's also a huge potential that it just sucks. I want this movie to be well received. I want it to launch into a franchise. I want to be enriched in the lore. But above all, I just want a good movie. And I don't think that should be too much to ask for. But maybe it is. I guess we'll see.